Hi everyone, it's John from RFM Calc, and today I'm talking about Squarespace. So Squarespace is a website hosting platform, originally launched in 2004, really with a blogging focus, then moving into more content-based websites. And then in 2013, they added e-commerce functionality as well to allow you to actually sell products through your Squarespace store. It's a very popular platform, so I believe it currently powers around 3 million websites worldwide, which is certainly a significant number. I would say it's targeted mainly at the kind of more entry-level end of the market, so the pricing plans are very affordable. You don't get a huge number of features out of the box with Squarespace, certainly on the e-commerce side. Maybe a few more than you'd expect, which I'll go through shortly. But what you do get is a really easy-to-use platform. It's very intuitive. It's very much a drag-and-drop interface. Very easy, I think, for people to pick up. And I think that's one of the reasons why they've become such a popular platform and why they're used by a lot of people. Although it is targeted to that lower end of the market, I should say there are certainly some significantly sized brands that do host with Squarespace as well. So it's not just for small brands. But like I say, I would think that they're mainly targeted at that lower end of the market. But as I'll talk through now, they do have a decent number of features for e-commerce as well. And as you won't be surprised to know, it does integrate no problem at all with RFM Calc. So what I've done for today is just set up a little free test store. So you get a free trial with Squarespace, which is great. So this is it. So you can see you've got this nice kind of user interface here with the various admin areas down the side, which I'll run through briefly. This is basically right off the bat what my store looks like. So you can see this here. There's a little edit link here to change this. You can instantly view a mobile preview as well, which is quite a neat feature, and see the desktop view too. So you've got various sections on the left hand side here. So things like pages allows you to add new pages to the navigation. Design allows you to pick different templates, so they've got quite a few different templates and things that you can play around with as well. We've got marketing, which basically has various bits of functionality to integrate with your email marketing, but also with your social media too. So you've got things like SEO as well, so you've got little kind of SEO checklist things here, and you can do some customization around the SEO as well, which can help. So a frequent kind of complaint people have around these lower end platforms like Squarespace is that they have a very negative impact on SEO, but it looks like they're trying to address that here with various features. But also you can see we've got some analytics as well, so this gives you a basic kind of range of reports here, so certainly nothing like the level of reporting you'll get from RFM Calc. There's obviously no lifetime value data here, or certainly not cohort analysis or RFM segmentation, but that's not unusual. No e-commerce platform gives you that out of the box, which is why RFM Calc exists. But you can see you can get some decent kind of basic level data here in terms of sales and traffic and so on, and engagement in terms of site content engagement and things like that. So there's some reasonable stats there, but obviously not the level that we're after. And then you've got various other kind of profiles and settings here as well. But the bit I'm really interested in today is the commerce section. So this is what powers the e-commerce functionality for the Squarespace store. So what I've done is I've set up a few kind of test products and placed a few test orders. Again, it's pretty easy to manage. So you've got your setup down here in terms of payments and checkout and your shipping methods and so on. You will find, so for example, for payments, there's only kind of 3 that you can add. And point of sale Square is only for the US, so you've got basically Stripe and PayPal. You can't add other payment gateways, as I understand, so you've got that kind of limitation versus a lot of e-commerce platforms. But again, if all you need to do is just take credit and debit card payments and PayPal, then that kind of gives you everything you need really, if your intention is just to set up a quick store. There are other kind of bits of functionality as well, so you've got kind of low stock alerts which you can trigger to yourself. What I'm going to look at now is inventory. So you can see here I've got some products set up, so some come kind of with my test store, and then I've created my own as well. So you can see here I've added basically you can add different variants, and you can play around with a few different bits of functionality as well. You can change the kind of content and how that's managed and add images. So it kind of gives you all the basic functionality really that you'll need. And then what I've done is I've placed a few test orders through the site. So Squarespace doesn't have a test payment method, and I didn't want to set up kind of live transactions for this. So what you can do is basically I've set up a 100% discount code for all these orders, so that's why they all show 0. But I've placed orders with varying amounts with various different products, and then I put those through, but with a 100% discount code, because that's the only way I could really check out and place the order. And that works fine. And you can see I've got all my data here. If I click on an order, you can see you've got my billing address, shipping address, and all the different products that I've ordered. You can see there I've used my test code. One feature that's quite nice in Squarespace is you can add additional fields to the checkout. So I've added a notes field and just a radio button field for do you really want this order, which is required, and you have to put yes or no, just as a bit of a test really. But that applies to the CSV, which I'll mention shortly. So those additional fields that you can add to the checkout right out of the box with Squarespace, that's a built-in piece of functionality. They will automatically pull through to the CSV export, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, so there you can see I've placed a few test orders. Now the question is, how do we export these? So we can import them into RFM Calc. And it's actually really straightforward. So you can see we've got an export button here, and that's native to Squarespace. So I have to say, when I first signed up, I wasn't actually sure this would be here and that I'd be able to do this, but it's actually really good. Obviously for a lot of systems, but particularly for RFM Calc, that we're able to export these orders as a CSV file. And it's dead easy. All you do is press export. You can pick which order statuses you want to export, so either pending, fulfilled, cancelled. Obviously you can filter these out on either in your CSV or on the RFM Calc side as well, but you've got the option here, which is nice. Then if I press next, you can select a date range. If you want to select maybe just the last 2 years, for example, you can do a specific date range. Obviously all time is fine for RFM Calc in general anyway, but particularly because I've only got a small number of test orders there. And then finally, you can select to export orders just for a specific product too, which is quite a nice feature. So if you only wanted, for whatever reason, to focus on a particular product, you could export orders that only contain those products. But obviously for me, any product is fine. And then you just click save. And then you can see that's pushed that straight to the browser, so it doesn't work on a queuing based system. It just pushes your order CSV there straight to the browser. There's no messing around with column headings or different kind of delimiters. It's a comma separated file with all their standard headings, and that's fine, and that's all you need. So obviously other e-commerce platforms will give you a bit more flexibility over what you're exporting, but I think the fact Squarespace have actually got a CSV export is obviously great because we wouldn't be able to integrate with RFM Calc if we didn't. But that's it's a real positive, and I think it gives you everything you need out of the box. So what I'll do now is I'll just save that file, and then we can have a look at it. So now we've downloaded the file, let's have a look at it. So this is a copy of the export that I've just downloaded from Squarespace for the order export. So it downloads as a CSV file. All I've done is just saved it as an Excel file, just so we can spread the columns out and make it a bit more readable. So there's a couple of things just to note from the overall structure. So the first thing to say is that the orders run newest to oldest. You can see here, based on the dates. Basically, so you've got the paid at date, fulfilled at if the orders have been fulfilled and created at. So the orders, and you can see for the order ID as well, run newest to oldest. So different e-commerce platforms do that in different ways. Some platforms, for example, Magento will list oldest to newest, but a lot of platforms, Shopify, for example, list newest to oldest. That's fine for RFM Calc. Either way is no problem for us to handle. The second thing to note is that it exports in a multi-line per order format. So what you can see is, just taking into account this, for example, this top order here, order ID 8, it's got the top line of information here, but then everything seems blank for these subsequent lines, even though the order ID is the same. That's because all the products are listed on the subsequent order lines. What's worth noting here as well is that the first product is on the order line, but it's then just the subsequent products that are listed on the subsequent line. So this order has 4 products. And there's 4 lines, but the first product is against the main order information line. So different e-commerce platforms do this, again, in slightly different ways. So this is quite common, but sometimes what you can find as well is that the order line with the key order information is separate and the products are then listed separately. So you'd effectively had 5 lines for this order, for an order with 4 different products. But here the first product is shown on the initial order line. So that's fine. Again, that's no problem for RFM Calc. We'll handle that, no problem at all. And just basically combine all that information into one order line. You can see then you've got a few more bits of information. So we've got the delivery method here. You've got the currency, the total amount paid. So we've got shipping and taxes split out. As you can see here, the total amount is 0 because I've used a 100% discount code. If not, the total amount would be in there. So that's probably the best field to use, is the total when you're reporting, because typically you'd want to report the actual price the customer has paid for the order. So if they've used a 20% discount code, you'd want to report the total as 20% off, just to give you that accurate picture of how much revenue is coming in. So that's typically what you'd use, but obviously for my examples, it's 0 for all of them. You've then got the shipping method. As I mentioned, the products split out onto multiple lines in terms of the products that are on that order. And then you've got the billing information here. So standard name and address. So the name is combined into one column here. So some e-commerce platforms will split this out into first name and surname. But Squarespace uses it in one column, which is no problem at all. You've then got the shipping address separately, as well as the phone number for the billing and shipping. So Squarespace during the order process gives you the option to have a different shipping address, which is why they're there. But you can see, even though these ones are the same, it still repeated that information. So even if the billing address and the shipping address is the same, it still repeats that in the shipping address fields, which again is fairly standard, I think, for most e-commerce platforms. You've then got a few other little bits of information. So what we can see here, we've got this private notes field, so you can add notes on the admin to an order, and that'll pull through to the CSV. We've also got, which I think is really interesting, these additional checkout questions. So checkout form notes and checkout form, do you really want this order, which are additional test questions I added to the checkout on Squarespace. And you'll notice that they then pull through automatically to the CSV, so I didn't have to do anything special to make those appear in the CSV. They just come through automatically. So that's quite neat as well. If there's additional information you want to capture during the checkout process, it will automatically pull through to the CSV on Squarespace. And then I think the only other thing really to note is that it's obviously a fairly standard format. If you're familiar with Shopify, you will notice that it's very, very similar to how Shopify exports their orders. Very similar to the Shopify CSV format. I think there's definitely been some inspiration taken by Squarespace from Shopify, or vice versa, potentially. But I would suspect Squarespace have looked at the Shopify CSV and used that as a basis, because the format is very, very similar. Even right down to some of the column headings are identical as well. So if you're familiar with Shopify CSVs, Squarespace is basically the same in terms of the order export. Which is worth noting as well. But that aside, it's all fairly standard data. All the key data we need for RFM Calc is in there, which I'll demonstrate shortly in terms of how to map those columns. So this will work absolutely fine, and from this we'll be able to generate all those great reports that I mentioned earlier. So for lifetime value, average time between orders, RFM segmentation, customer cohort analysis, you can see new versus returning customers as well. We can get all of that from the CSV file, which is great. So now I'll just demonstrate how to create a project in RFM Calc and how to upload this CSV. Okay, so now we've had a look at the CSV, it's time to create a new project. So that's really easy. In RFM Calc, as you can see, I've got my test projects for other platforms here. So we'll just create a new one in the same way. There we go. So for the default project currency, this store I've set up is in US dollars, so I can change that there. The default US date interpretation is fine. As you can see, all the dates in the file are US format, so we can leave that the same. That's no problem. Again, for the date ordering, as I mentioned, the file runs newest to oldest in terms of ordering, so you can select that if you want, but auto detect is no problem as well. And then, yeah, that's all the settings really we need. So now I've got my new Squarespace project, it's time to schedule our report. So all I'm going to do is upload the raw CSV file. So this is exactly the same file I've just been looking at, but in the original CSV format that I downloaded from Squarespace. And then it's just a case of mapping the columns. So for the order ID, if we go back, you'll see that's called order ID, which is nice and descriptive. Now for the order date, you've got a few options here. You could use paid at, you could use fulfilled at if you're more interested in the date when the order is shipped, although because the orders have to run in date order, if you're not fulfilling in the same order the orders are placed, that may not be a safe one to use. So what's probably safest is this created at line here, which is when the order was actually created. So that's probably the safest one to use for the date. We do have a currency code column, so everything in my order file is US dollars, but there is a currency code column in the file here for USD under currency. So if you were having orders in multiple currencies, what RFM Calc will do is convert those other currencies into your base currency at the time the report runs, which allows you then to compare the data like for like in terms of revenue and pricing data and so on. So that's really useful, so we'll include that. The order value column, again, you've got a couple of options here. So subtotal, total is what I would normally recommend because that will include taxes and shipping. But in this case, just because that's always 0, because I've used 100% discount, I'm going to use subtotal. Obviously, you can change this on a report by report basis as well. So if I come back and do a future report under this project, I can change that really easily when setting up the report. For the order status column, I'll use fulfillment status, and what I will do is just to demonstrate, I'll take cancelled from there. So we'll use fulfillment status and we'll exclude cancelled orders. So what this allows you to do for the order status is basically exclude any orders you don't want to include in the report. So you can have a comma separated list here of statuses, as this little help overlay explains. So that's not essential. You don't have to do that. You can include all orders. You can also delete these rows from the CSV, of course, before you upload it, if you wish to. So either way is fine, but this is just a nice, quick, easy way to exclude certain orders. Now for the customer ID, you'll notice we don't actually have an internal customer ID, which isn't unusual in the file. That would only normally be assigned to customers who've logged in and created an account, which often on retail sites isn't the case anyway for most customers. So email is really what we'd recommend for this. Again, you've got the option to exclude some email customer IDs if you want to there. You can add a common separated list. You can also do wildcards if you wanted to exclude an entire domain. You can do that too really easily. And then it's just a case of mapping the other columns that we discussed. So we've got the email, we've got the billing phone, we've got the billing name. So as I mentioned, Squarespace only has one column for the name and last name. That's fine. All you have to do is set that as the first name column and ignore the last name column. And there's a bit of help there just explaining that as well if you need that. And forget. And then we'll put the billing company in as well for the company field, which was just, where's that gone? So this is why it's always good to check. So I thought there was a company field. But there isn't actually. So there we go. One to be aware of. So there isn't actually a separate company line. You could add that as one of your custom additional fields if you wanted to on the Squarespace checkout, but by default it won't ask for a company as part of the address. So we'll ignore that. That's fine. That's not a compulsory field. And then finally, what you can do is, depending on your account plan, you can generate reports around custom columns. So what this will do is it will take the data from that custom column and generate a selection of tables and charts around it. So for example, one really easy one to use is delivery method, which on Squarespace, if we just go back to the CSV, is under shipping method there. And what that will do is that will generate a selection of reports based on the shipping method the customer uses on their first order, and you'll then get data in terms of the lifetime value based on that shipping method, the average time to the second order, the total number of orders placed, and so on, all based around whichever shipping method is used on that first order. So that's really useful as well, and that allows you to have a lot of flexibility there, because you can, of course, and a lot of our clients do this, add additional columns to your CSV first before you upload it, and then RFM Calc can generate additional reports around that extra data that you're providing. So that's really straightforward as well. And then we'll just call it test Squarespace 1, You've got the option here to anonymize customer data. So if you don't want any real names or email addresses appearing in the report, you can select yes there. But obviously with this just being a test report, I don't need to do that. And then finally, all I'm going to do is tick this box to overwrite the default project column mappings. And all that does is select all this information here, all these columns that I've mapped here and saved. They will automatically be populated next time I run a report against this project. These column mappings will automatically be saved, so that will save some time if you're coming back to run future reports against the same project. So that's really useful as well. And then we just save column mappings and continue. And that's it. So that report is now scheduled. That'll generate in a couple of minutes, and I'll get an email to say the report's complete. And that'll allow me to see all the data in terms of lifetime value, customer cohort analysis, RFM segmentation, all that key information will be there in the report. Great, so I think that's everything for this video. So just to summarize, we've spoken a little bit about Squarespace as a platform. We've been through how to export orders as a CSV. We've talked about the structure of that CSV in terms of how Squarespace structures that, the overall architecture of the file, and then the individual columns and what they all mean. And then we've just been through creating a project on RFM Calc and uploading and scheduling a report. And so hopefully that's been useful. Thanks for watching, and please come back soon and check out our next video.